Awesome to have you, Kelly. If you don't know, Kelly is the CMO of Zendesk, a great friend of mine. We lived close to each other in Seattle when we were there. Classmate at HBS, just an all-around awesome dude. Kelly, do you mind saying a few words about what you do and your path to Zendesk?
Sure, Manny, it's great to be with you today. We've got a long friendship, and so it's exciting to be able to talk about what's happening in the world of AI and support. So as you said, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Zendesk and been here about a year and a half, and we're driving hopefully a lot of disruption and sort of momentum in the customer support category.
You are. So let's get right into it because it blew my mind when you guys came out with the outcome-based pricing. So tell me how the whole journey, just don't spare anything, just throw everything in it. What happened? How did it get there? How is it working out? What was the thinking? Take us through the
For,
story.
for sure. Well, I guess if we step back, our journey at Zendesk with AI actually goes back a number of years, a couple of years before the big chat GPT moment where we've made some organic investments, some inorganic acquisitions. And so we've been thinking about this moment, machine learning, AI, for a while now. Like I said, a couple of years before chat GPT really came on the scene. And so I would say,
You had a
yeah,
team in Australia, right? That is all
yeah,
AI.
yeah, we've got a team
It's
in
an
us.
amazing
That's right.
team. You guys put a paper a while ago that was seminal on this stuff. Like I remember that.
That's right. We've got a team in Australia. We have another group that's really focused on AI and ML in Lisbon. And then I can talk about it a bit more. We also have another group in Berlin, Germany, and that's on top of our developers and product people in San Francisco. So we've got sort of a
Wow.
distributed
That's like
AI.
spy shit. Like it's like
Yeah,
it's all over. It's like
yeah. We spread it around, just in case. But yeah, so going back to your question around like, how did we get to where we are today? We started again investing and experimenting in machine learning and then AI a few years really before ChatGPT. ChatGPT, I think, just massively accelerated not only awareness but also capability, right, with these new large language models that were broadly available. And so for us, it was a very natural moment to, I say, double down on trying to unlock additional value for our customers by using automation, using machine learning, and now, of course, generative AI.
right.
So we were quick to sort of take advantage of the OpenAI large language model capabilities. We've got a strong partnership with them. Of course, we're very tightly connected with Amazon Web Services. Much of our infrastructure is built out on AWS. So for us, we were able to sort of take the investments and the know-how that we had several years prior to ChatGPT and OpenAI and quickly build a set of customer support generative AI models using our sort of 18 billion support tickets to go and train those models and tune them and make them purpose built and purpose ready for the customer support category. So that's like, I guess, a foundational, technology capabilities. And then, we can talk a little bit about, okay, well, how do you pair the technical capabilities with business model with, what customers are either looking for or don't know that they're yet looking for.
Right.
Um,
Did the work that you did in your chatbot help you get an advantage and sort of like ramping this up faster? Tell
for
me how
sure.
that helped.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's exactly right. So, Zendesk has been invested heavily in messaging bots really since the very beginning of our start, going back over 15 years ago. And we, like I said, it's been a mix of organic and inorganic investments. One of the things that we did in the last year or so is we purchased an advanced bot company called Ultimate. And so, they have been brought into the fold. And now we've got the ability to sort of pair the Zendesk bot that we've had invested in for quite some time with additional advanced capabilities from Ultimate, and then layer in the OpenAI large language models. And now we've got something that is really, really powerful, in terms of agentic AI built for customer support. So that's like, maybe a quick sort of path down memory lane with like getting to where we are from a technical perspective.
Right.
And then I think your question might be fun to sort of dive into. It's like, okay, well then how do you, again, pair that with the business model and hopefully not only unlock a bunch of customer value, but accelerate that transition, if you will, to AI for support.
Right.
And so I could talk a little bit about that journey on the business model side. So a couple of things, like I said, so in addition to sort of knowing or sort of anticipating that our category would eventually be disrupted in a big way by AI, we've
Right.
been thinking about, okay, well, what are the implications on the business model? And I think, if you look across the market landscape today, you're seeing, I think, a lot of different vendors in our category experiment with different business models. And
Right.
so early on, you saw tokens, and people are like, okay, well, that gets to be a pretty complicated
Right.
thing for the customers. How do you even think about
It makes no sense. You can't
it?
forecast it. It's really
You
hard.
can't forecast it. It's not really tied, and this is where we've ultimately gone to customer outcomes. I mean, you can have a lot of interactions with AI and hence tokens that don't lead to really any value.
Right.
And
Do you
so
guys know it from the seat compression point of view, or do you see it from like, okay, we need to bring this innovation. This innovation has a cost. Tokens that we can
yeah,
pass it, but it doesn't really tie to any business value. So we have to go back to like rethink the model altogether.
yeah, great question. We think about today the predominant or dominant model for customer support, as you just mentioned, Manny, is a seat-based model. So you just count up the number of support agents, and that's what you pay a company like Zendesk or Salesforce or whoever it is. And so a couple of things, I think, paired with this sort of explosion in AI over the last 2 or so years, you also had, I think, some just broader systemic issues that were happening in our business and other SaaS businesses. And not to go too far off track here, but there was a lot of government stimulus that went into the economies with COVID. Then we saw a big spike in demand, as did many tech companies. And then, of course, there's a knock-on effect, right? So you see, whether it's gaming or it's travel, I guess travel was sort of down during COVID, but gaming and sort of other industries, big spikes in demand, therefore more customers, more need for more customer agents. Well, as that sort of normalized, post, call it, the peak years of COVID, to your point, Manny, I think there was a lot of seat contraction in the support industry. So you've got these like dueling factors. One, the sort of seat contraction, so a decline in sort of growth for many companies or just more broadly in the market. You've got AI arriving on the scene. Customers are trying to understand, well, how do I pay for it? And then, to your point, substantial costs in many cases. And so you're trying to factor all those things in and then come up with a business model that you think is going to be well received by customers and then accelerate, this transition to AI.
But it requires a level of like self-disruption, right? Because like you're actively trading seats right now, like not seats that you lost, but seats right now.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
How do you make like it's a little bit of a Mrs. Model Screw, if you would,
That's right.
piece, what I mean? You
That's
gotta
right.
be careful to make sure that the structure stays up.
That's exactly right. I think many companies, established companies that have been around for a while, Zendesk and others, that's exactly right, Manny. You've got this sort of very disruptive moment, and I think you have to make a decision. You and I think, know someone in this area that is sort of famous for talking about the innovator's dilemma with Clay Christensen. And I can tell you, I mean, while it's well understood, I think, by a lot of people, it's one thing to understand it. It's another thing to sort of be in it,
To live it
and say, to live it, right? To live it and really say, okay, I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out. But if I think mid to certainly long term, this seems like the logical outcome because it's what customers are going to want. It's just a better way, I think, to sort of monetize, if you will, and deliver value for customers. And that's that switch from seats to some sort of consumption-based pricing model.
I was really surprised to see you guys just pick the ball and run. You would say that a private equity owned enterprise will be less, modern, if you would. And I'm not knocking anybody, but you guys did it. So like, what was the conversation like on the board of like, we're doing this?
Yeah,
100%.
I think one of the really great things, at least for us, is that we've got a set of owners, investors that, number one, are very growth oriented. I will say that oftentimes there's this sort of blanket perception that private equity, it's about, well, how do you just take cost out of a business? And that's how you, create value, unlock value, cost and inefficiency. But, there's a broad range of private equity firms. And we're very fortunate to have a few that are very growth oriented. And so for us, if anything, there's been not only a recognition that this would be a very disruptive moment for our category, but also a huge opportunity. And so if we are sort of risk taking, and we could talk about how we mitigate that risk, but focus towards growth, then actually, I'll tell you that it's a tailwind for us. We've got investors that are actually pushing us to go faster and to spend a lot of time on this very topic versus playing defensively and holding back. So it's a
Right.
very interesting and somewhat paradoxical,
That's awesome.
what you would think about.
What was the alternative? Let's say that you didn't do this. What is
Yeah.
the scenario?
Yeah. Well, and I think you just kind of see that it's playing out right now with some of the other players, the established players, which a couple are alternatives. One is, there's a lot of talk around Copilot, right? Microsoft was quick onto the scene. And so that's just saying, well, you know what? We're going to take our generative AI and just continue down the path of a seat-based model.
Right.
But we have a Copilot. Other, people in our space have Copilots. So that's a good thing. But if we have time, we can talk about kind of the different dimensions of how AI is transforming support. But there's an idea that AI will help the human support agent do their job better, faster, in a more personalized way. That's the idea of, well, it's more seats. Give me some more cowbell.
Right.
Man,
Right.
let's just double down on that. That's that's one option. A second is to say, okay, well, and you brought this up earlier. In many cases, these AI models generate a lot of cost, and depending on how the customer is using it and how the company is training those models, and so it's like, well, we got to go consumption based. That way, we can protect ourselves,
Right.
right? If there's a lot of costs that our customers are sort of consuming, and those are some of the models you see right now. Tokens, but I think we're seeing a shift away from tokens because it's an abstract way to talk about it. But you're seeing a lot of consumption-based models in our space that are based on interactions or conversations.
Right.
So Manny, if I'm the AI and you're trying to get help as a consumer, we'll just talk about how many interactions did we have, and we just add that up. Doesn't matter if I help solve your problem.
Right.
We'll just sort of keep the meter running
That's
while
right.
we're talking.
That's right.
And then we'll just say, well, listen, you must have got some value because the AI was talking to your consumer for, for a long time. That's, like I said, that seems to be a pretty, prevalent modal.
That is the most
And then,
established model right now in support.
yeah,
Right.
I think that's right. If you look at the big players, like a Salesforce and others, even Microsoft, who with their AI agents, they're focused on this interaction or
Right.
number of conversations. And then, of course, there's the model, and I'm sure there are others, but the model that we've gone out with, which is a true outcome-based pricing model, which is to say, hey, we're going to get paid when we resolve our customer's issue. And, for the support industry, we talk a lot about ticketing, right? So you open a ticket and
Right.
both the agent as well as the consumer are interacting. And then at some point, you close the ticket and
Right.
hopefully you've resolved it and you can get feedback on that ticket. Was the consumer satisfied? What's their sentiment? You can also run analysis on the actual ticket itself to sort of gauge and assess, was this a positive outcome?
Right.
And so, that's where we've gone. And I believe strongly that's where the industry is going to have to go. But it's really saying, again, we get paid when our customers realize success.
That's awesome. Give me two pieces of information. One is, how was the reaction of your customer and the market when you came out with it? And what are they saying now that you're being in market for a few months with it?
Yeah, great question. So, I think one of the reactions, that we've seen with customers as it relates to AI in customer support is it's very different, Manny. Like when, go back a few years when, maybe more than a few years, when cloud came onto the scene,
Right.
where I think you had pretty compelling and clear economics, but customers were reticent. They were slow to say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to give up control. I got to put my data someplace in this cloud, not in my
Right.
data center. So you had a lot of like, um, customers holding back on what were very, I think, pretty clear economic benefits to moving to the cloud. I think this AI era that we're in is like the opposite. So we've got customers that come to us and say, hey, listen, my CEO wants to know what my AI strategy is. And they're laser focused on customer support, right?
Right.
Because I think intuitively, we all know that not only does it have the potential to deliver a better support experience, more personalized, faster,
Right.
but also save a bunch of money. So to answer your questions, customers were very and have been very eager to harness the power of AI,
Uh,
but many are stuck in these like proof of concept pilots. And
uh,
so they're like, listen, I don't want to spend a lot of money because I don't actually know if I'm going to get the return on
right.
this big investment.
Right.
And so when we showed up and started talking about, well, how about this?
So it's
We'll
like
only get,
fear of messing up. Like everybody's like
yeah,
trying to
fear of
figure out the
messing up.
strategy. Like, well, how do you get to
That's
it?
right. I don't quite know. I mean, I know AI is going to transform my business. I don't know. Oh, I don't know what the use cases are. And I don't know how much value I'm going to get for it. So that was one of the things when we showed up with an outcome-based pricing model where you immediately take all that off the table. They're like, wait, what? So I can invest in your technology and I only pay you when I get the outcome that I want. So that I think, we've seen very strong and positive, sort of reaction to the model, and it gets them out of this. How many pilots can I run at one time and how much of an investment can I put in? Again, because I only really have to pay when I get the outcome I want. That's one. The second is, I think you and I've talked about this in the past, is consumption-based pricing is tricky though, because it creates variability in the customer spend, and having that consistency of spend is something that they're looking for. But again, I go back to, well, when you're doing outcome-based pricing based on resolutions, you are matching their cost with the benefit that they're getting. So in other words, if they're seeing a big spike in demand and therefore they're getting more inquiries or calls and they're able to resolve those issues, they're really only they're paying us when they've
Right.
seen typically a big spike, in their business. And so their revenues are growing and therefore paying us a portion of that lines up.
What do you structure your pricing in such a way that, because your contracts are kind of long term, right? So like you
Yeah.
structure your pricing in such a way that you say, look, we're gonna resolve 1 million tickets this year, so you're just gonna
Right.
go ahead and charge you for that, and then like if there is overage, we'll sort of figure it. Like, tell me
Yeah.
more about how do you
Yeah.
technically structure the deal so that people feel
Yeah.
comfortable about the spend.
That's right. And there's some, I think, established models out there, AWS with their commit-based pricing, right? A lot of consumption, but it's like, to your point, Manny, being able to sit down with customers and say, hey, your ticket volume today,
Right. You do. Right.
right? That. And so now we can start to say, well, what percentage of that do we think we can fully automate, using AI, and then get a sense for, okay, they have a baseline understanding, to your point, Manny, of how many resolutions do they think they need. And then you can make some trades, which is like, hey, listen, you'll buy this many resolutions and then, you can lock in better pricing. And if you go over that, then we can true up or make adjustments for the next year. So we're still in that sort of, experimenting, getting lots of feedback. But I think that's where things will trend
Yeah.
because we've seen it with some of the hyperscalers already.
So now that you're in the cool kids camp, right? Like there's a camp, everybody yes, and now the cool kids decide to go over here. So now that you're over here in the cool kids camp, like how is like competitively? Like you're showing up
Yeah.
to deals, and are you like what are the conversations like compared to the ones that you had when everybody was priced the same way?
Yeah, no, I think again, it's still kind of, kind of 6 to 9 months into this, and it is fun, right, to show up and be able to have a very different conversation
100%.
vis-a-vis most of the competitors. No, I think it's there's two things. Number one, the cool kids, you are seeing a lot of these sort of AI startups. They're very aggressive in terms of, wanting to disrupt from a business model perspective and find, product market fit. So you're sort of, like you said, being associated with that, some level of thought leadership, driving innovation. So that's nice when you show up and the customer says, hey, not only are you doing some innovative stuff from a technology perspective, but you're innovating in your business model. and we aligned with your long-term vision. And then to your point, like, how does it feel to compete? It's actually a lot of fun, right? Because you get to go into some accounts that maybe were a lot more difficult to penetrate and get sort of late stage conversations. And now they're really wanting to take those calls and say, great, we're going to consider this alternative, even though maybe in the past we wouldn't have.
So remember, we had this conversation at breakfast about competition, right? Like, how do you develop your positioning in a competitive environment? You use kind of like another gear in your arsenal. So how do you positioning change with this new thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that's really interesting about our space is when you look at competition, we've got it from all sides, right? Meaning that we've got, on one end, hyperscalers who are out there with their own, sort of contact call center AI solutions and more or less saying, hey, you should build it on our infrastructure.
Right.
You've got those competitors.
Like the bucket of Legos approach, right? Here's a bucket of Legos.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Here's a bucket of Legos and good luck. And oh, by the way, we're kind of just happy when you're spinning our meters. And there's a set of customers that are drawn to that. So we got to compete with that. Where you've got maybe on the other end of the spectrum are those, integrated suites, the ones that people would think about with Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, right? And we're competing where they've got a service cloud, a sales cloud, a marketing automation cloud. And so that's one set of challenges. And then we've got everything in between. I mentioned the sort of startups that are taking a whole different approach to, some of the less expensive, less feature, kind of down market competitors. So to your point, like when we think about how do we position our offering, you almost have to factor in all these different, very like 4 or 5 very different types of competitors.
Right.
And our approach has been, it's when you add up what Zendesk brings to the table, which is we're easy to use, we're easy to scale. Easy to scale is really important when we think about this era of AI, because you can be stuck in these, system integration, tuning, AI pilot modes for years. And we want to be able, right? It's instantly on. Another big difference, and I mentioned this early on, is that we're built for service. So we have 18 billion support tickets that we can go train the AI on and help customers get a very service-oriented AI experience. And then the last thing that I think for us is really something we think a lot about is built for humans. And I think so much of what's going on right now, there's a lot of hype around the tech itself. DeepSeek, we're talking about to model. Look, at the end of the day, in our business, there's a human that's on the end of every interaction, every resolution, whether that's the human support agent who's an employee or it's the consumer. So we think about that, and then you end up designing your products both for our customers and for the ultimate consumer in such a way that we think is differentiated.
That's awesome. Last question, and we'll wrap. So where does this go? So you're just dipping your toes into this new outcome-based pricing. Like, so walk me through a year. How are things looking? What are you doing?
I think a year from now, not only I think will we see significant advances like we saw last week, right? And so we're going to continue to see, I think, these models get faster, get cheaper, and again, be more tuned and purpose-built, I think, for certain verticals. And so I think the overall experience for the consumer should just get much, much better. Secondly, I think voice is going to play a very important role. But today, we're interacting with AI by typing things mostly into a bot. And I think we're going to see a big shift. You think about the average consumer, whether it's Apple Intelligence or, Alexa or whatever, that are going to want to interact and summon AI through a more natural language interface. So I think that's going to be a really interesting trend for consumers and for people like us in this business. And then the final thing is, and you mentioned this, Manny, is I think those that are willing to disrupt themselves are going to be in a much better position. And that means you've got to, I think, be willing to let go of some of the things you have today in order to pick up things in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was an amazing summary of
Manny, always
over the last 6 months, and I'm sure it wasn't easy, but you made it sound easy, which is you're a big player. So thanks again, Kelly, for illuminating this topic for the rest of us.
Thank you for having me. Always great to spend time with you, and look forward to chatting again soon.